Hello, this is Jeannie and Mike from Florida, and we wish we could be with you during this celebration of Life with Paul. And we thought what we'd do is put together a top 10 list. And Jeannie, you explain that.
So we recognize that Paul's beautiful attitude and zest for life and the way he lived his life, he had a lot to teach us all. So we thought we would share the top 10. Actually, there was more like 1,000. We cut the list down so the video was going to be short and you wouldn't be here all day. But then we're also going to ask you to share, below after we finish putting this up for everyone else to see, what did Paul teach you about your life, and what is Paul's qualities that will live on in you, so we can just celebrate his life, right? Because we know one thing: if we're grieving, can't you just feel Paul nudging you to not be sad when you look back to his life? Mm-hmm. That's who Paul was. So let's get right into it. Top 10 things that we think Paul had to offer and teach us. So you go first.
Number 1 would be games. Paul loved to play games. Cards, tennis, golf, bowling. Big proponent in the football pool. He loved playing games and bringing people together, and that was a big.
That's a good quality, isn't it? Actually, Paul is the only person who ever taught me to follow, and what I mean by that is we're both Aries, and Aries like to lead, and Paul was a great dancer, and Paul could dance with anybody. And it's a pretty good metaphor for Paul's life when I say Paul could dance with anybody. Anybody could dance with Paul. I think that's a perfect way to say he taught us that. Anyone can get along with Paul. Anyone could certainly dance. And if I could be led by Paul, that says something. So,
okay, my number 2. He'd always be the first one to help you out if you needed it. And you can tell a story?
I wish you would.
Okay. So, Hagen Drive, Essex Junction, I had a gallbladder attack, and I made a phone call because I could not drive to the hospital. And I walked out on the driveway, and here he came down the street, and he rounded the turn on Hagen, and 2 wheels came off the road. I mean,
dedicated service. Right?
I didn't think we were going to make it to the hospital. I didn't think he was going to make it to my house. But just it goes to show you, he was very anxious that day to come to my aid. Thank you.
Do anything for a friend, right?
Yes.
The one thing that I think Paul has to teach many of us, we just finished this class on Buddhism, and Buddha nature was one of the things we learned. And Buddha nature means to be in the moment. And let's just take a moment to pause. There's one thing Paul was very much in the moment. You could not engage him in negative talk about his past, and you certainly couldn't engage him about the worries of the future and the world. He was so busy being right in the very moment that he was in, with a smile on his face. So that to me is Buddha nature, and Paul is Buddha nature. So that's what Paul has to teach me. You're next.
Okay. Competitive. I talked about those small games. But he liked to win. If it was cards, he wanted to win. In golf, one-on-one or family against family, he wanted to win. He always talked to Matt and Mike, and one day, all of a sudden, Matt outdrives Paul. And Paul, I'm telling you, I still remember the day that happened, and Matt, you probably consistently continue to do that. But Paul, that was an amazing day, and I still remember it today.
That's so funny. So he was competitive.
He was
in a playful way, right?
Fun way.
So another thing that I think Paul has to teach us is, stories from the past that brought him joy seem to be really imprinted in him, or within him. He would tell the same story. In fact, you'd kind of know the story was coming when he'd say, "Remember the time we," and some of these stories, if you think about your own life, we probably don't recall them in as much detail, but Paul would. And I think that's a real attribute or an asset to have in your life when you remember those moments of joy with such detail. And he held on to them, and I think that's beautiful. Beautiful.
Another one, he wanted to include everyone. say we got that bowling thing coming up or that golf tournament coming up, and we're sitting at a bar, he would ask the waiter or the waitress to join. And I'm telling you, his circle grew, and then it grew continuously on a daily basis.
And will continue to grow. Right?
He had many friends.
Mm-hmm. Love that. So another thing that we feel Paul had to teach us was, well, first off, he taught me how to kiss.
Excuse me?
Yes, I know. Actually, not kiss like that, but keep it simple. Paul really did. He, I think his belief was, I tried to engage him in, life concept hacks and talks about, where I thought the world was, and he would just look at me like, Gina, I'm not going there. He really did approach his life in a very simple way, and viewing that through the lens I have today, I really think that is absolutely a quality. So I like that. He kept it simple.
Okay, to Matt and Mike, you had an amazing dad. And how do I know this? He talked about you all the time. He loved you two very much. And I guess the message we want to pass on to you, that Paul wants to pass on to you, keep it light and keep it fun, because that's the Paul way.
Yeah, that's the energy of your dad, right? The last point I'd like to make about Paul is that he made friends through osmosis. And what I mean by that is he assumed we were friends because he was friends with Mike. And another thing, the reason Paul is so dear to me in my life is he introduced me to Jane. And Jane, you are and will continue to be a very dear friend. So without Paul, I wouldn't know you, and I bless that. So thank you, Paul, for that. But friends through osmosis really means that if you were any friend of Paul's, then he was a friend of yours. And all expansive, right? So how would you like to end this video today, Mike? What would you like to, how could you end this video?
To the Wanderlich family, again, we're so sorry for the loss of Paul. He was a dear friend of mine, and Paul, rest in peace, my friend.
Thank you. And I'd like to end by saying what I know a little bit about grief, being someone who works with people in grief, that I truly do believe that it's important to grieve, but more importantly, when we're really looking at the energy of Paul, we will be filled with light. We'll feel that little nudge if we're feeling sad. And we all know, right? We all know that when we're living in the energy and Paul lives on in us through love, we need to do all these things that we mentioned tonight. So that's us sharing our part. So sorry we can't be there to be with the family, and this is how we will get our respect to the family and out to his friends. So don't forget to leave a story about what Paul taught you in your life, and we'll keep this going, and it will be out there for all to see. Thanks.
Thank you.
Love and light.